My name is Salman Hamid, and I'm Assistant Professor of Integrated Science and Humanities at Hampshire College.
I'm Kevin Anderson. I teach courses in film and anthropology at the University of Massachusetts, and this is Film Autopsy. Hello, and welcome to a no-gloves film autopsy of The Dark Knight Rises. As people may know, when we do a no-gloves autopsy, there are certainly spoilers involved, and it's more of a discussion of some of the issues that are embedded within the film and how they might relate to contemporary society. So I think first and foremost, we want to talk a little bit about the very unfortunate incidents in Aurora, Colorado during the midnight showing of The Dark Knight this past Thursday, Dark Knight Rises. And I think that also, well, it's an extremely sad event, and we're not trying to mine that for something to our own benefit, but I think it does speak to something that's at the very heart of the Batman trilogy, which is this notion of vigilantism. And there have been people blogging and sending messages back and forth now talking about, well, had there been other people in the theater who had been armed, maybe this could have been prevented. But all I could imagine in a situation like that is with the smoke-filled dark theater, it would have turned into an absolute gun battle. But I think this element that is so essential to the character of Bruce Wayne and Batman is a very dangerous one. And I think in this final film, they really do set it up quite clearly, especially with the character of Blake, when he quits the police force at the end and says, where there's structures, there's shackles. And it's quite true. And so therefore, he's kind of saying, well, we need these Batman characters. We need these vigilantes. And we just hope that they do good. Well, there's no guarantee they will.
Yeah, and again, I think we have to be clear about it. It's not about, like, we're not saying like, oh, this is a bad thing in the movies or there is a direct link to that. But the question is, like, what kind of a message is in there? And movies don't have to have positive messages. There are fantastic films. And we've talked about Kubrick, for example, in our regular review of Dark Knight Rises also. And Kubrick's vision was quite dark in many ways. But certainly, what has happened in Aurora, it just brings up these questions in an unfortunate manner. And I think there is another, apart from the vigilante aspect, and this I'm not sure whether there is a solution to that or not. In Batman films, in the trilogy, and other things also, there's also this matter of spectacle. It's not simply a matter of bad things happening, but also the villains, for example, are really making a showcase of violence, which gets reported, which gets amplified, and that is where the unfortunate thing lies. That that with this type of a thing, with the shooting, that's exactly what has happened. It has been amplified and things like that. I don't know what the solution is.
Which is kind of inevitable. There's going to be media coverage.
Absolutely.
And that's exactly what the people like this desire.
Right. And so let's come back. This was something we wanted to get it out. But what about the issues of class? This particular Dark Knight Rises has a number of elements that directly connect to our current day situation.
Yeah. There's a stock market heist. There's the character of Selina Kyle, who's a Catwoman played by Anne Hathaway, who is this kind of like female Robin Hood. She even agrees to that assessment of her character, that steals from the rich because she's down and out. There's a kind of a subplot or plot elements related to orphanages and things like that. And so I think the film coming out now is very good. I think while the film brings some of these issues into focus, I was not very pleased with the results, particularly with the character of Selina Kyle, because at the end of the film, she's seated at this cafe with Bruce Wayne, who somehow still has money enough to go to Florence, and they're dressed nicely, and she's kind of adopted this ritzy lifestyle, and that's what she was exactly against. So I feel that was a moment where Nolan and the other screenwriters, just like they really dropped the ball. It should have been not the two of them, begging for quarters on the street, but something a bit more realistic.
Well, I think this was a sort of like the Ron Howard ending to it, like that. Okay, well, there was all this nuclear explosion and stuff like that, and yet here you go, everything is fine. Maybe he made his money out of selling radioactivity in his body, but so everything was fine, and that was sort of like I don't think that's where thinking part was missing from the Nolan part. There was more pretension to be a more complicated plot and complicated thing, but which Dark Knight again was wonderful in that. But here I think underneath it there isn't much. He played it safe.
Yes.
Which is unfortunate because I thought with Inception he raised the bar, Christopher Nolan, that you can have challenging plots and yet make a lot of money. Here he played it safe, which was unfortunate, and by playing it safe, it raises these complicated questions. So here was my suggestion for a really scary villain. So he had Bane with this mask and saying all these mumbling things. Well, think about the real Wall Street heist or banking heist. Think about the LIBOR scandal that's going on, where people are setting simply like sort of like different kinds of interest rates and setting those up. Well, like, you know, that is a much scarier heist, and that's because in some sense you don't have the figure evil.
You don't have
in
the
fact,
spectacle.
A spectacle of evil. And you know, you can have the same type. I mean, I know that it won't be a Batman film in the same way, but I think it would be an interesting, challenging direction.
Yeah.
Like, you know, that you take, hey, look, here is the vigilante angle, but look, where does evil live? And I think that would have been some different direction for a superhero film to go, which Christopher Nolan did with the early two Batman films. So, I mean, it would have been interesting to just take it sort of like, you know, purely white collar.
Right.
That's the villain. That's very evil.
Well, and I think along those lines, there's also there's two characters in the film. There's Blake and there's Commissioner Gordon, and they are very solid representations of working within a problematic system, a problematic society, but maintaining, you know, certain ideals and being true and doing the good, you know, and they certainly, I mean, one of them stays with the Force, the other one leaves. And I think it's just kind of building off what you said. I think in terms of the evil, it's like, and those two characters aren't full of spectacle. They don't really get involved with special effects or even really big chase scenes. They just make smart, very heroic choices. And there were a couple more realistic villains in the film. The one board member of Wayne Enterprises who was actually trying to get his fingerprints, and then his other guy. I think, you know, exploring those characters a bit more so that Bane can come in and be the thug, but I don't know. I guess as a Marion Cotillard's character, she was a bit of a surprise at the end as being a baddie, but it's just almost a little bit too late. There was no realism to the evil, yet there was so much potential, especially since this did deal with class and economics.
And the Cotillard character, I mean, that was a surprise, but again, I thought that was a surprise for the sake of surprise.
Yeah, revenge for the father. It's like, you know,
rather than this integrated structure to it. And again, if you have a trilogy to work with, I mean, I think you can do a better job. But again, it is not to say that this was a horrible trilogy, but it's just that the expectations were high. Here is a director which basically made, like, you know, I mean, kind of like Lord of the Rings type scale in terms of money that was given to him. And so if you are making that, I think he's a smart enough director to actually do something more with that. And that would have brought it. Talking about vigilantism, I want to bring up Watchmen in a minute or so that we have, or less. I mean, Watchmen actually did address the pitfalls of these kind of superheroes. I mean, I loved the novel, and then we watched the movie, and I actually liked the film also.
I did too.
I know that a lot of people, fans, were upset about it, but I thought it was but that addressed this question, and I think that is missing in this, but that kind of an exploration, which could have easily happened here, that is missing.
Yeah. Regardless, I do think that Nolan is continuing to do big summer blockbusters that are fun and engaging to watch, that have some interesting, kind of stimulating intellectual issues related to them. Some of his films explore that a bit more than others. I think, speaking for both of us, I think Dark Knight Rises could have done a better job at that. But you know, I think he just shows so much promise as a blockbuster filmmaker who's making, you know, films that are quite interesting to really think about, and they're much more complex in terms of the narrative and the kind of philosophical issues.
It's tremendous potential. I mean, Inception showed that, Insomnia, Memento, Prestige, and so I'm certainly looking forward to it, but you have to raise the level. This one was a little bit of a disappointment.
The Dark Knight rose.
Not too much. It could have risen a bit more. Christopher Nolan rises. So next time we'll look for that. This one is sort of like the ending of Dark Knight. It's kind of on the darker side. Yeah. Next time, Christopher Nolan will be better.